Stimulus talks have been taking place for months, yet we still have very little accomplished and the American people are suffering. Negotiations constantly go back and forth between our leaders with very little movement, and Congress is comfortable to take time off, go on recess, spend time with their family in a time when the American people are hurting the most. And if it weren't for one group, this one group of a bipartisan group of congressmen and women have been slowly getting stimulus negotiations back on track. They did this back in August. They did this before. They started at the end of August, started working on a package, trying to introduce it to our leaders, to Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi. Finally, come September, this proposal was put out there. This group is the Problem Solvers Caucus, and they proposed a package back in September that was considered great. It was a $1.5 trillion stimulus package, and a lot of people truly liked it. Yet, it went nowhere. Now, and as of this morning, this group, the Problem Solvers Caucus, again, is calling out the leaders, calling out Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, calling out Kevin McCarthy, and Chuck Schumer, saying that we need and are demanding stimulus negotiations continue this week. No more waiting. No more waiting until they come back to Washington on November 30th. Let's get it done now. Let's start negotiations today. They're saying there is no time for another recess. The American people need help now. And I can't agree with them anymore. Republican Tom Reed from New York, he said that he wants to see the leaders come back to the table and restart negotiations. He went on to say that people in the Problem Solvers Caucus are already speaking with many senators and representatives to get their feedback on what kind of stimulus package would ultimately pass. Here's what we know. Currently, and this is directly from Tom Reed, who is a Republican, he said the $2 trillion stimulus package is off the table and will not happen because of the outcome of the election. Now, this is the current consensus among Republicans and Democrats. But if the Senate runoff election in Georgia goes Democrat, then that $2 trillion stimulus package, you can expect something closer to 2.4, maybe a little bit higher. Tom Reed did go on and say that just the other day he was speaking with White House officials and they want to get a smaller stimulus package done. However, he stated it's not going to be a $2 trillion package. That ship has sailed. That is gone. The package that we could still get would be anywhere between $500 billion and $1 trillion. The sad thing about either one of these packages is there would be a lot of stuff left off. However, the good thing about either one of these packages is that it would be signed off by President Trump during a lame duck session, and it would act as a bridge to take the economy through the winter to the early spring. What reports are saying today is that if something of this size, $500 billion to $1 trillion, passed, then another stimulus package would most likely follow in the next few months. It's not a guarantee, but it's something that is most likely to happen due to the fact that most economists, most experts, even health experts, do not predict that us here in the United States will be out of this pandemic before the summer of 2021. Now, I know a lot of people are going to ask, and so I've already done the research to figure out exactly what would be in a $500 billion stimulus package and a $1 trillion stimulus package. So based on reports, here's what we think, okay? Just think, will be in a stimulus package. Again, we don't know. We don't know. Congress is the only one that could tell us after they come to an agreement that, okay, this is what's in it. But here's what many people are expecting. For the $500 billion stimulus package, this would include PPP funding, school funding, liability protections, and $300 a week in unemployment benefits. Yes, there is no stimulus check there. There's no rental assistance. There's no food assistance. There's a lot of stuff missing. When it comes to the $1 trillion stimulus package, here's what we know. We got PPP funding, school funding, liability protections, $300 per week in unemployment benefits. We have state and local government funding, but this is also including funding for the state and local government to distribute the vaccine, and we have stimulus checks. So this is the good news about these two packages is if we can get it closer to $1 trillion, that means unemployment benefits, means PPP funding, and it also means stimulus checks. Three of the things that most people are currently wanting. Right now, we know that Joe Biden is open to a smaller stimulus package, even though his team is saying that he is not. Right now, it's being reported that his team is saying he's not open to it just to try to get this negotiation back into the favor of Democrats. So we'll see what happens there. Joe Biden doesn't want to take office when the economy is going to be at its worst, and he is urging Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to get a deal done, provide relief before it is too late. Now, the biggest news out of all this, and the biggest news this morning, is that President Trump is willing to sign a stimulus bill if it is targeted and under $1 trillion. This is the most critical piece of information right now because Congress could do all the negotiating, could get the entire bill ready to go, get it, everyone's agreed upon it, it's passed through the House, passed through the Senate, comes to President Trump's desk, and he ultimately decides, no, I'm not willing to sign that, it's too high. Or we need to put this in there. Or we need to put that in there. It will come down to President Trump's signature. Now, Democrat Representative Josh Gottheimer, who's the co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, he said earlier, let's get politics out of the way and put the people first. Let's get a deal done this week so that we can provide relief to the American people. Now, I know a lot of people are going to ask, so I will just answer this right now. Yes, Congress is on recess. That does not mean they cannot negotiate. That just means they're back in their home districts. Congress is not in session. That's pretty much it. Okay? So they're on recess. Doesn't mean that some are not in Washington. Some still are, but most are not. So technically, negotiations could still continue. There could be a verbal agreement on a package. The package could then be drawn up and ready for viewing on Monday when Congress returns back to Washington. And doing this would allow a few extra days of negotiations, which could ultimately lead to a better deal. It could lead to an actual deal. It could lead to the two parties coming closer and narrowing the gap. So this would be good if both parties could come to the negotiation table and hammer out a deal. However, right now, I don't see this happening with our leaders. Now, amongst other people in the House and the Senate, yes, they could, and most likely they are. But as far as our leaders, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, I don't see them coming together, calling each other and working out a deal. I just don't see it happening at this point. So what exactly about this update is good? Okay, I just want to point this out. The good thing is that we're finally getting answers as to what President Trump will or will not sign. Until now, many people didn't know if President Trump would even sign a stimulus package during a lame duck session. Now, we actually have an answer. What I can tell you about stimulus negotiations moving forward is we are getting closer. But I anticipate the stimulus negotiations to get very close for our two parties, for our two leaders, to narrow that gap, our differences, get somewhat close, and then it will stall until after January 5th, when the Georgia Senate runoff election actually occurs. Then after, if Republicans win, I expect to see a stimulus agreement very soon after, before Joe Biden were to take office on January 20th. If Democrats win, I expect nothing to happen except for negotiations until after January 20th. So that is what we know right now. It wasn't a huge update, but I wanted to fill you in on what's currently happening, what's taking place behind the scenes from our leaders. because there are still people working on a stimulus package and working on a negotiation, kind of plan behind the scenes of our leaders. Our leaders are the faces. They're the ones that are technically supposed to be negotiating. However, they do very little negotiating. They pretty much leave it up to their caucus. So because of that, we will have to see what happens moving forward this week and even next week. But as always, as I know more, I promise I will share more. Consider subscribing so you don't miss any more updates, and I'll see you guys on the next one.